First of all, I want to thank all of you for making the trip out tonight. How does it go? Sometimes you didn't have to do it, but you did, and I'm very grateful for that. This is what you call weather that would keep a lot of people away. I saw last night at the Slave Theater, as well as I see tonight at the church, that it does not keep you away, and I'm very happy that you are here. I want to thank Hatshepsut, some know her as Bert, for having contacted me and invited me to come to New York. I hadn't been to New York in 20 years, believe it or not. And when I came here before, it was part of an actors group, believe that or not. I've come a little ways, I hope. I want to thank again Brother Leroy Appling for having opened the doors of the church and invited me in. I want to also thank Reverend Philip Valentine for warming you up, or maybe I should say satisfying you, I'm not sure which. And I want to thank the people again at the radio station today for having had the faith to put on a person who's a little bit different and see what I could do during drive time. One of the other stations didn't choose to call me back. Obviously, they either didn't know about me or did, and therefore thought I wasn't worthy. So I do thank the station that did bring me in. I want to thank you for being here. I have studied the science of metaphysics for 42 years. I have taught metaphysical classes for 28 years. I also am a PhD in history, so I qualify, whatever that means. What I have found, and I do a lot of lecturing, I'm privileged and blessed to have people invite me to speak, and I love what I do. I wouldn't want to do anything else. And as long as you will attend, I won't have to. It makes me work hard, research hard, but one thing that has caused me a lot of problems, I try to tell the truth. That nowadays is a no-no in many cases, but it's going to be a yes in the century and age to come. Because pretty soon people will see a lie forming, you'll be able to read electromagnetic fields, you'll sense the vibration, and you will tune out. That's what's happening to so many of our so-called leaders now, but understand they're only emulating the master defrauders of our planet, and their time is gone. There is a statement, paraphrased, if I may, saying something to the extent that nothing is so inevitable, so decisive, so irrevocable as an idea whose time has come. Yes, I know that's not quite it, but you got my message. The idea that this is a time where things are going to change, that something is about, that things are not quite like they used to be, is a vibration that everyone is picking up. I won't attempt to duplicate what Reverend Valentine spent a lot of time with, because some of you may already be into mental science classes or into metaphysical classes, and I love metaphysics, but you just were exposed to at least a half an hour of it, and I'll add my bit as I see fit, but you understand the general idea, which I do agree with. I had a privilege in 1960, and I've always been a brash man, very egotistical at one time, and I thought I was smart. And I had a decision to make. The decision was whether or not to pursue a corporate identity and make what I thought lots of money, or to get into a research on something that I knew nothing about, UFOs. Now that's a heck of a choice, but it was a dilemma for 13 months in my life in which I was pretty much out of it. Now I don't mean I was psychotic a little neurotic, which I still am. And I admit to that. I have deep neuroses because as I look at the psychotic activity going around for government and for social structures, I realize that I ought to be a little bit neurosed. But the decision I had to make was one that I knew was in my heart, one that had to be found out. I wanted to know if UFOs existed. And why was that such a plaguing idea? What did that have to do with the corporate identity? Because if they did, then everything that the corporate world stood for would be folly, because they told me that there were no such thing as UFOs. No such thing as government experimental craft. No such thing as subliminal mind control. No such thing as history being anything but the truth. They told me a lot of things. I found out later, all they told me were lies. I will tell you this now, and many of you have been exposed to some of the best historians on this planet, and I do not kid you, you have been, that if you take the history that's presently being taught and you turn it around, the ones in the school systems, you turn it around 362 degrees, is that right? You get closer to truth. We've been fed a lot of lies, and the lies are not coming home to roost. The lies have come here in the form of extraterrestrials who are now influencing our government. You see, when you lie enough, you draw certain things to you. The Trilateral Commission, I'm sure many of you are experts on that, the Bilderbergers, the Council on Foreign Relations. This new world order is really not new at all. It's the same old warmed over stuff that we don't want to smell or deal with, and now they're going to give it to us spoon-fed. So instead of respecting us more, they respect us less. And that's good, because it makes the battle lines very staunch now. Starting in 1694, with William Patterson, the founder of the Bank of England, and Adam Weishaupt, professor at the University of Ingolstadt, they set up something that the Illuminati before them had been doing ever since they came to this planet. Control the people by controlling the pocketbook and the minds. And once you have your banking and their money, your colleges and universities and their minds, you can socially destroy whatever else you want, either through military might or through social mores that you adjust and make what you want them to be. So, from 1795 to 1820, the Rothschilds, placed in 5 strategic European countries, and I'm going to tell you why this emphasis on Europe in a few minutes again. 5 sons who could do anything they want because they had unlimited stock certificates, credit cards, and banking control. And they began to influence those countries to bring about the old world order, business as usual. Germany, Vienna, England, Italy, and France. In 1906, at the Bilderberger Hotel, the Kuhns, the Loebs, the Rockefellers, the Warburgs, the Morgans, the Schiffs, the DuPonts, the elitists who live anywhere, spend anybody's money, and control everybody's lives, and have been doing so for so long that they think that they're God, continue to do what they had been doing. We are told we have to be citizens of a country in order to vote. We are told we have to be citizens in the country to have banking interest and withdraw funds and to pay taxes. But you see, these people pay no taxes, but they legislate what taxes you pay. They set up a Federal Reserve Bank, which has nothing to do with the United States government at all, and you've been living that lie and paying those taxes forever, and it's all illegal. They do the same thing to every country and control the banking and political interest of all those countries because the money buys them off. They set up people and destroy people. They cause people to kill themselves. They cause people to kill their minds and their spirit, and that's even worse. So mightily have they controlled this planet with their talk of money, their deeds of purse strings, till they've turned grown men into little sniveling babies. Not because they beat them or so, but because they threaten to kill them economically. They turn women into prostitutes and whores for the want of the same money that they control and print as they see fit. There's nothing wrong with our economy, that if you didn't have to pay back the international bankers, that's where the debt is. You'll never pay it. They can't retire the debt, Clinton lies, because the debt is the banking interest of the international bankers, and you've got more indebtedness than you had on the original principal loan, and it can never be repaid. That's a farce. The budget will never be balanced. But they'll take every penny from you, the middle and poor, because you support all world governments. When there reaches a certain time in the history of a planet, certain things happen in the course of events that are recognizable. We have had 7 different floods upon this planet. We are somewhat recognizant of only one. Each time it has wiped out a thriving civilization that thought that they were the greatest, only to find out that there was always something a little bit greater. When people think that they are God and act ungod-like and begin to then manipulate forces and people as though they were pawns, they call forth finally their matchmaker. Those that cry for battle and want combat in the ring will suddenly get an opponent worthy of them if you ask long enough. They felt that everybody on earth was their pawn, and they begin to herald it and throw it out and change books from the Bible on. And now they finally called forth their match. In fact, they may be overmatched. In 1960, I went to a conference where a Polish man by the name of George Adamski was holding forth about UFOs. And he went on to say that he had seen some, and he began to visit the kings and queens throughout Europe. And they invited him, and they paid him good money. And I was impressed by how could this little Polish man visit kings and queens in Europe, receive $5,000 to $10,000 per lecture, and be talking about foolishness. I was impressed by that. So with the zeal and drive of youth, I ran down to this symposium, found out I was the only black young man there. For these were not attended by generally black people. I went to this hotel, and in a bright, ponderous voice, burst out where he was doing a press interview and said, "Mr. Adamski, I got to talk with you." I talked to him as a black boy or black youth. I talked to him as a universal mind that wanted to know something that nobody else had been able to teach me. And believe it or not, instead of being arrested by some of the guards, who immediately, when I burst in upon this mezzanine scene, accosted me, he said, "Let him go, I know him, I'll talk with him." Well, he didn't know me from Adam. We wound up talking for 7 hours, roughly about 10:45 at night to 5 o'clock in the morning, on a mezzanine in downtown Chicago. And I asked him all kind of questions, and I told him the reason why I asked, because of all the books that I had read about UFOs and extraterrestrials and how the races of man begin and all the things about that. His came closest to be what I thought might be truth, but I wanted to question him as to his veracity and why also he said he could not name the aliens that he met because it was not right according to universal law. Well, to make a long story short, and I have all of this on tape, some of you have asked me about it, it's right there on Close Encounters of the Fourth Kind. He invited me back the next day. I was in school. I had no extra money. I said, I can't come back. I came to this one because I wanted to find out, and I appreciate that. He says, but you made some points and raised, because he was with a lot of charlatans, so-called psychics that weren't. I know what a psychic is. These weren't. And a lot of other things, again, that just didn't seem to fit. So he said, come back tomorrow. I'll have your way paid at the door, and I want you to see something for yourself. I said, I'll try. As usual, I went to my couple of buddies, and as usual, the couple of buddies couldn't find time to go to a UFO convention. There was better things to do. After all, it was a Friday and Saturday night. You know about that, don't you? Sure you did. Having gone there, and I watched a 16-second frame showing UFOs zooming over a couple of buildings, and then a minute-and-a-half segue showing 5 UFOs zooming around a Army Air Force fighter. And then he stopped it and detailed again, showing shadows and characters and so you can begin to get points of reference which anybody who's dissecting a film for fraud wants. And then afterwards, he began to chastise his audience by saying, well, this is not afterwards, in the middle of it, by saying, those of you who are with the CIA, and at the time the CIA was something that I wasn't familiar with, those of you who are with this and that, why do you follow me around? Why do you give me such a hard time if I'm actually saying nothing? And he kept on harping on this, and then I began to notice a strange thing in the audience. People began to get up, turn red, because like I say, I was the only black face I remember there. See, if I turned red, they'd say, oh, he's just flushing a little bit. And leave and walk out and so on again like this. At the end of the lecture, I looked around the audience, and since I had had so much of Mr. Adamski's time, I felt it would be an imposition to spend more time on a Q&A. And so I looked around in the audience with whoever else I could fraternize with, trying to see if there might be somebody there that I could meet, share books, literature, and stuff about this. And this is when I saw 2 black men in the audience that I had not seen before. And because they were black, and because I felt therefore they might live in the hood and might have some things in common with the brother, I went up to them and I say, hey, bruh, you know, man, I'm glad to see you here, so forth. One was about 5'4", fairly short gentleman. The other was about 6'2½", and in 60, that's a pretty tall gentleman. One had a bush, and at that, not George, had a bush that, of course, at that time, a fro, that they were not wearing too much later, and the other had a very neat cropped, close-cut hair. When I went up there again, they both looked at me as though I was from outer space. I said, oh? I said, hey, bro, you didn't hear me, right? What do you think about Mr. Adamski's thing? We're not talking to you. I said, oh, my God, they're passing. Well, I only saw 2 faces that looked like mine there, and they weren't. So, again, I was again confused. So I went off to a white woman who was standing at the corner of the room. It's a big ballroom, by the way, where they had the lecture, who had been with Mr. Adamski that night before. I didn't ask him to identify her. He only said that she traveled with him. That was enough for me. But I noticed in the course of his conversation how reserved she seemed to be. And also when things got real tough, he seemed to kind of look at her for recognition or for highlights. So I felt he had respect for her. That was good enough for me. I had respect for her. The brothers didn't want me. I thought, well, maybe a white woman might. I go over there. I smile. I say, is it okay to talk with you a bit? Adamski's pretty busy over there, so on and so forth. She says, fine. We start talking. And then I notice her looking distinctly past me. Now, you're talking. I look people in the eye when I talk. And I'm looking her right in the eye, and she's looking past me, and she hadn't done that. It'd be last night or the day before. I said, why is this woman doing this? So I'm looking, I turn around. Guess who's coming up? All two of them. The brothers. Here they come. I said, doggone it. Soon as I start talking to a white woman, here come the brothers. So I had a chip on my shoulder by this time again. I'm giving you exactly as it happened to me in 60 to get you to understand the vibes of what I'm going to drop on you. Here they come, and of course I said, well, I'm going to make this short. I'm not going to introduce them. But lo and behold, I turn around. She is nodding. They're nodding. She walks away. I am outdone. I say, now, come on. Enough is enough. I said, you're leaving? She says, yes. Okay, now I got my high pants on, my hip pockets up high, and my lips out. And I got jaws that are pretty tight. So they came over and they speak. I didn't say nothing. So he says, I came a long way to see you. He says, I know that I seemed disrespectful, but I was very intent, and I was told I was supposed to meet somebody, and the person I thought that I was to meet was one of the questioners up talking to Mr. George Adamski. I found out it was not. It is you. Hello. I said, You know, not now, bro. You had your opportunities. You don't step up, First time, shame on you. Second time, shame on me. At any rate, we finally got past that, and something just came over me and said, listen and learn, and listen to what the man is going to say. So I said, well, okay, you're here to answer any question I have? He said, yes. I said, yeah, and he's here to what, supervise it? I get very smart alecky at times, okay? He said, no, but he's here to observe. I say, great. I say, well, what am I supposed to ask? He said, you had a lot of questions last night, some of which Mr. Adamski couldn't answer, but you have none now. So I said, well, I hear what you said. I said, but if you treat everybody that you meet the way you treated me, then you have a pattern of ego that I might not even want to trust. He says, you are brash. I said, yes, I am. Then became a episode in my life that has changed my life forever, caused me to make a decision to go into metaphysics rather than into the corporate world, and caused me to voraciously study and meditate almost now on a daily basis, and I'm so happy it happened, I don't know what to do. Not only did I lose time while in the presence of these brothers, but I time traveled because I saw that place there as it probably looked at least 90 years before when it was first constructed, and little old men with the little, I know you probably don't even remember this, you may have seen it in the movies, where to unscrew bulbs you had to set up a little thing like this, an extension, and twist them. You know what I'm talking about? Okay, saw all of this as I'm standing there talking to him, so on and so forth again. And one of the questions I had asked him was, what was time? And he says, well, you ask about time. And I said, yes. He says, well, look around you. And I saw all of this, and I said, well, I guess this is true. And I said, well, wow, all the people have left. This guy's turning out the lights. And then it hit me what I had said. There were at least 300 people in that hotel auditorium. And I'm standing by the doorway away from Adamski, who was, I guess, these 50 people were up there asking him questions. To get out of the hotel room, you had to come by where I was standing talking to these two men. I look around, and someone is turning off the light, but not by the means that I had just seen, and the people had filed out past me to the elevator down the hall, and I hadn't been aware of any of it. So I said, wait a minute, this may not be Oz, Toto, or is it Kansas? But still, in my brash self, I wasn't ready to accept exactly what was going down. So I still said, well, maybe we should move out to the hall. When he moved out to the hall, and I'll tell you what, I'll wrap this up, but I want to share this because it does give a little background as to why I am doing what I do now. When I went out to the hall, there was a black woman who was the elevator operator for this particular service, and when she came up and leveled off the elevator and the last of the crowd got in, we got in behind them, and this little guy, the shorter fella, came up to her again, and he says, "Oh, I'm so sorry, and so forth again." And I said, "Well, this is strange." And she kind of was just shrugging him off, it's okay again. So we got down, we were on the, I think it was the 6th floor. So we got downstairs, and we all got off the elevator, and I said, "Can you guys wait a minute?" I said, "I want to talk to the lady here on the elevator," because by now I was feeling kind of out of place, out of sorts. I came up to her and I said, "If you got time," I said, "I just met these guys." And they said, "They're kind of out the box, kind of weird." And I noticed that the little guy was really, saying something to you. "What happened? Can you give me a little background?" She says, when they came up late. And that the hotel doesn't have a lot of black guests. And the UFO conference is usually not visited by black people. At that time, we didn't use the word black that much. I think she said by colored people. And so I didn't think that they were going to the UFO thing. I assumed that they were going to a meeting that a few black people or colored people were meeting up on the next floor. So I went past the UFO thing. And the tall guy said, "Please, I want to get off here." So I stopped the elevator, brought it back down, and at this time one of the white men on the elevator said again something about niggers, sticking together, so on again like that. And he was angry because I had brought the elevator down to let these two black guys off, and it, I guess, whatever again. So I just took it, this is the woman talking now, she said, I just took it with a grain of salt, per se. He says, but the little guy just seemed to just go off. When he said niggers, he looked, he jumped at the guy, almost leaping across the floor. Then he stopped. He said he was shaking. He turned and looked at the big guy, and the big guy just kind of put his hand on his shoulder, and the guy just stood there. And he was looking all around. He says, I'm so sorry, something. Said the big guy just escorted him on out, and they left. So I said, well, you mean they'd never heard the word nigger before? So he says, well, not the way he acted. He didn't seem to even understand it or comprehend it. So I said, well, okay, these guys really are weird. I said, but maybe they come from some part of Africa, and they're not used to this kind of thing. So in the presence of these men, I had time predicted 15 minutes before an incident happened. I asked him, what was a Negro? He said there is no such thing as a Negro, that the word is necro, N-E-C-R-O, and that they closed the G to confuse the situation. It is the dead, the unknowing, the lost in mind and consciousness, and they live in necrophiles. They are dead. I said, okay. He said, I'll give you an example of what a Negro is in about 20 minutes. I said, yeah, right. I said, at this time, I think I want to get out of the lobby because, oh, by the way, the man spoke very loud. He was not talking condescendingly. He talked. His voice boomed out. So I said, I think I'll go outside with these guys on the street. Still didn't feel too comfortable with this situation. So we're standing now outside in the front of the hotel, these three black men, these two and myself. He also, at that time, well, I'll have to explain to you how this really hit me. I was forming a question to ask him, and I felt the question was trite, that it might make me feel like I wasn't a big mental giant, and I was kind of wrestling with whether to ask him or not. And then he went ahead and he answered it, and I'm wrestling with this other answer, and I said, wait a minute. I said, I didn't say that to you. I said, I was thinking that. I said, I didn't say. And then finally my little braggadocious self kind of began to get itself in hand. I remember I stepped back away from him. And I said, who are you? He said, that's not important. I told you that I came a long way to answer your questions. He also, as he was talking, and the little guy was with him, constantly kept hungry. He kept saying, when are we going to eat? When are we going to eat? Okay, that was all he seemed to know outside of don't call this woman nigger. Okay, those two things seemed to keep him pretty upset. So at this time, when I'm going through this, I hear ho ho ha ha, yeah baby, yeah man. So well, here come the Negroes. And around the corner, downtown Chicago, the loudest thing on the street, probably with, I'd say, with the least money in the pocket, but the loudest mouth on the street, came the Negroes. Ho, ho, ha, ha, and the whole... I said, how in the world did you know these guys were going to come around the corner 20 minutes ago? He said, that's not important. Those are your Negroes. Dead, lost, unknowing. I say, okay. This time, he kind of looks at the time. Oh, I asked him, do you have the time? And he kind of looked at the time. When he did this, I jumped again. I said, what in the world is that? Like I pull up, I got a watch on my arm. I don't know what he had on his arm. He said, it's a chronometer. I said, oh, thank you. I said, can you tell me what time your chronometer is keeping right now, boss? You know. At any rate, obviously something was different here. And with the mind reading, with the foretelling the future, with the time loss, I found I fell into a classic UFO extraterrestrial meeting that many people experience just about those same things. Only I had the privilege of restoring it at the time, doing it again without having to get on board some kind of spacecraft, but enough proof was given me that these weren't the learned professors that I had been taught by previously. They had a little bit more going for them. I asked him, why me? And the only question and the only time I got some kind of a reaction that was not controlled, this big guy was pretty controlled, from this tall fella, was when he kept asking me, did I know who I was? I said, yeah, I'm Delbert Blair. And if he asked me that 4 times, I asked him 5 times. Delbert Blair, I done told you that. Okay? That seemed to disgust him no end, and it kind of bothered me because I thought I knew my name. At any rate, that seemed to bother him, and as we began to break up this conversation, which lasted then, I guess, a total of almost an hour and a half after the lecture, I said, well, quite obviously, you're not going to invite me over to look at some of the magazines with you, are you? He said, you know I'm not. I said, he's not either, is he? He said, no. I said, do you think I'll see you guys again? He said, you may see him, but I doubt it. You will not see me again. I said, fine. I said, where did you say your address was? He smiled, and that was about it. I said, well, one other thing. I said, I have a big decision to make. And I said, I am wanting to find out if there are such things as UFOs. I said, could you think of anybody I might ask? He said, when do you want to see one? I said, now. He said, no good. I said, well, how would I go about seeing one? He says, watch the skies for the next week. I said, I'm always going around with my head up, but it's beginning to be dangerous nowadays. I'll have to get a buddy. I have a sense of humor. You have to, in the worst situations, I find humor, and a lot of people can't deal with that, but it's the way I get by it. So they went down the street. My first impulse was to try and follow it. A big, loud voice in my head said, play it off, brother. Go. You're not supposed to be there. You got your little audience. Go on and deal with yourself. So for the next 3 days, this happened on a Saturday night. It was a Friday night, Saturday when I came back. So that Sunday in the morning, I'm looking up, and of course, I got a crook in my neck, and that's about it. About the 3rd day, or that Tuesday night, I had an urge to go to a movie, and I came back kind of late, as usual, alone. And I'm walking down the street. Now, this is not some rural outback area on a highway. This is in downtown Chicago. I live in an area called Hyde Park, and it's quite a heavily traversed place. So I'm looking up, and it looks like I see 2 stars move. Well, I had been looking for stars to move for some time, or something to move up there that I could identify other than to hear everybody else talking about contacts. So I looked and said, yeah, it didn't move. My eyes playing trick. I got to get my lenses changed. So consequently, I walked on down the street a little bit more. And then they darted, and then I did see something that caught my eye, and so I watched. And 3 of these stars came down in a linear thing like this, and then kind of not too fast, but not too slow either. They're moving maybe about 30 miles an hour. And they kept up perfect formation. If you've seen the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, how many have seen that movie? Well, that's just the way that Spielberg represented it, like they kind of moved when they came to Devil's Mountain and this kind of thing. That's exactly how these 3 stars dropped down and came across. I'm sharing this with you, and I talk about it now. I didn't talk about it for 18 years. And I'm telling you I'm doing all of this, so you won't have to ask a lot of questions about my background on this. I'm giving you the full details. When these UFOs, or whatever they were, came over, I could tell that the way they were traveling and the way I was walking, they would go by a bank of buildings, and I wouldn't be able to see them because of the rooftops. But it happened in the block that I lived in. So I had 2 choices: to run back to the corner, run around the corner, get to the alley, run down the alley where the backyards were open, I could see a clear view, or run up into my apartment, run through the house, run out the back door and see them. Either way, I thought I was going to blow it. The decision was to go up in the house. So I raced up the stairs, so on and so forth. Again, I was a newlywed at that time, too. Raced in the house, honey, 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 follow me in the back. What is wrong with you, man? Don't ask questions, follow me in the back. So here I go rushing out the back. Here she comes rushing out the back. I burst out in the back, and, man, I like to change my diapers. I look up out there, and here are these 3 things now having come down even closer, and they're distinctly there. It reminded me so much, again, of the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, where these craft were sitting on the landing field with the government secret base. Remember how it looked? That's just how they looked, and they could not have been any more than 1,500 feet up in the air. They were cloaked in some kind of an energy field. I assume it's an electromagnetic field, and they were all pulsing and glowing and so on like this again. And, of course, by this time, she burst out onto the porch. She knows I was a way out character when she married me, and I remember her explanations. God, what have you done now? Now, you talk about an understatement. I said, I don't know what I've done. He says, I said, look at this. He said, no, I don't see this. And she went back in the house, probably something I should have done. She went back in the house, and there I was as usual, left alone, looking at this. Well, I was fascinated because I'd asked for this. And then one just kind of began to kind of pulse and glow, and then, boom. If I hadn't seen all 3 there, I would, and if she hadn't said, what have you done now, which let me know she saw something too, I'd have thought I was crazy because like you see 3, then you see 2. I watched the next one, and it began to kind of go up and zigzag, right-angle turns. It took about 7 minutes to go off to the south. One went north, one went south. The last one took at least 17 minutes, and I remember just like it was yesterday because it changed my life. Went straight out, and eastward was over the lake from where I live in Chicago, and it must have taken at least, let's say, 17 to 20 minutes to go there. Well, they had demonstrated 3 means or 3 ways of flight aerodynamic lift. They had showed what they're capable of doing. And since the brother had told me to watch the skies for the next week, I think that I had an answer. Do you think I did? Up until that time, I knew that all extraterrestrial UFO occupants or whatever were white. Now I found out that they were black spacemen. Why hasn't anybody ever written a book about that? One book written by one man, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, talking about the mother plane. But all the other books I read on contact and stuff is always with white spacemen or blonde spacemen and so on and so forth. These guys were not blonde, these guys were black, and one looked very Negroid, African, or whatever you like to call it. It let me know that maybe I didn't have to search in another race for my angels, that maybe some were black and with me then. But at any rate, after that, my life took an entirely different course. I was able to read and remember things voraciously, and I lost a lot of the braggadocio and ego because I had seen what real ego was and real talent was, and I wanted to duplicate some of it and didn't know if I'd have the privilege. From that time on, I've been saved from 2 major accidents by miracles. I have been taken, and because they told me where could I learn more about it, they said, go to a metaphysical bookstore. I said, what is that? And I say, well, okay, I'd been studying things about UFOs, but what is a metaphysical bookstore? I found that my trigger, and some of you may know what your cosmic trigger is too, was chili. Whenever for 15 years I got a craving for chili, I was going to have a metaphysical experience. We all have our triggers. And one of the first times where that happened that I could identify was on a day when I was getting off from work a little bit early. I'd finished up my work a little bit faster, and I got this overwhelming desire for chili. And when I finally got to the place where the chili was, there was no parking space. And my stomach began to go crazy. If I didn't park that car and get that chili soon, I was going to die. So after going around the block twice, waiting for a stoplight, I said, the next spot I see, that's my car in there, I'm getting me some chili. I zoomed into a no parking zone by a bus stop, by a fire plug to get me some chili. Got out of the car, looked at the chili parlor across the street, and wound up walking around in front of my car because something like a goldfish bowl is the only way I can describe it, seemingly came over me. It was like I was encased in some kind of a field. The only way I can explain it to you is I was in a goldfish bowl. All the thoughts and hunger pains for chili left. The chili parlor's here. I walk around on the curb. What do I see when I walk around on the curb? Occult metaphysical bookstore. I'm in a church. I hope those words don't throw you off. Occult only means hidden. Metaphysics means above. Metaphysics is above science. There, all the books that I'd ever wanted to get hold of in my life were available, but the place was so small that under normal directions I would never have found it. Squares in between a tavern and a supermarket. And it's all dark, a little candle burning in the window. I said, oh, no. I said, now all I need is for some little old man to come up and say hi. Guess who came to dinner? Little old man, wizened, white-haired, came up. I said, no, guys, you don't have to be so dramatic with this mess. I said, okay, here's a sign on this metaphysical bookstore's door, knock for admittance. Big bold sign outside, knock for admittance. Fine. I took my hand and went to knock. And as my hand approached the door said, ding. Well, I had seen some things about one step beyond and all like that, so immediately I wanted to turn around, go back to my car, get my chili, and do what I had started to do. But, of course, you know I didn't. So I went in there, and that's when I was first exposed to what metaphysical books really were. All the books that I'd only heard about before were at my beck and command. And the guy said, welcome, I've been expecting you. I said, yeah, I know, and you know my name? He said, yeah, Delbert Blair. I said, yeah, this definitely ain't Kansas. So from that point on, my journey was in full force, and I have read probably more metaphysical material than most people are going to see in the next 10 years. I've had to read it voraciously at rates that sometimes I didn't even understand how I was taking all of this stuff in. And as I say, my life was changed, and I have been interfaced for and defended by whatever these presences are, even when I didn't know it, because I found out some things that could have happened that I was just, by doing other things, I averted. Why did I go into all of that? Because I'm hoping this would not be my last trip to Detroit, and I want you to understand that for those of you who first came up. I'm sorry. I just left Detroit. I just left. Now that shows you where my mentality is. To me, all cities are the same. What I'm saying by that is that there is no place I go that I don't understand and see people and interface with them. Everybody now on this planet that I'm able to go to is searching for the same thing. And they're searching for it, having to sometimes give up some of the things now that they used to think was important to find a new reality that they can live with in spiritual development. And I did just leave Detroit. I have classes, metaphysical classes there that I travel to each week. That shows how dedicated I am, and that's why my confusion. From that incident and from the things that have happened in my life, I've done a lot of rewriting of history books, but I haven't published. I've seen to it that the books were rewritten by threatening. I had a radio show, and I would chastise, again, certain curators and certain librarians for not having certain books in again. I found that as the young people and not so young people search for truth, that they're finally having to be brought into the reality that the truth of the history of this planet may be in the one place they didn't look, into metaphysics. That in those journals that they tell you are worth nothing and are sacrilegious and blasphemous is where your truth lies. That's where they hid it. Why do you think they form secret societies, teach their young, try to find their best psychics, put them together in think tanks like the Rand Corporation, and continue to try and control this planet where the very pineal melanin-carrying people that should awaken go to sleep if there isn't something there? I found out the truth about melatonin, and I will share with you a secret that I normally would not even share until some of you were at least enrolled in my classes, but time is speeding up, and the truth has got to be shared more and more, or we're all going to lose this planet. The original people who took on bodies on this planet had 12 DNA strands entwined together. In each of the cells, there were 12 DNA strands. The people were gods. Some of you, and I heard the brother talk about before I left again, and I know the way he put it out, some of you may have gotten lost, but as he said, it would come back to you on the subconscious plane, that there are 7 chakra centers, and I'm sure many of you have studied that, but there are 5 exterior chakra centers. 7 and 5 make what? That is the last vestige that we have now on the subliminal plane of when we were able to master all 12 degrees of those consciousnesses, because an alien form came here, smashed our 12 RNA, DNA patterns, set up a double helix, and left us functioning with 2. From a system with people who could take 12, and if any of you are geneticists or understand anything about RNA and DNA valences, and so, if you have 12 strands of DNA, and now we only have 2, and one of those has a helix that isn't operating, this would simply mean like this. You had a computer that had endless programs and a coaxial cable with endless power. You could put as many programs into that computer as you had time to spend studying your computer. And then somebody came and outside of 3,000 programs left you with 2. Do you think you would have lost something? That is what the black man feels when he cries out and can no longer do the things that inwardly he knows he's supposed to be able to do. He misses his 10 other DNA strands. He doesn't even have the master programs to access the file anymore because the helixes are broken. Now, the key to restoration of the 12 strands is in the Kabbalah. Why? Because that symbol represents a double melatonin molecule. Just that simple. Look it up. With, as the brother just talked about, again, before I came, Reverend Valentine, with the new vibrations the new electromagnetic energies coming in now past our sun, which used to filter them out, but now is allowing them to come directly to us. With this new radiation, with these new gamma rays coming in, this is agitating the membranes and causing what they call now garbage DNA. How many have ever heard that term? They even teach it in some of these stupid schools, garbage DNA. Huh? Okay. There is no such thing as garbage DNA. That is the fractured thing that an intelligence that took over this planet caused to happen to its spiritual people. So they had to learn a lesson. This garbage DNA are now entwining, vibrating, and that's why you're out here tonight in spite of the ice and snow. And the person that asked me on the air about UFOs, I didn't even mention the subject, let me know that you were ready. And therefore, I'm going to take the chance and tell you some truths that most of you are still researching. I'll save you some time in hopes that we can get on with the job that is needed. When these garbage DNAs now become the restored 10, the 12 lost tribes, the 12 lost strands, and come together once more, they can create the 13th anomaly, the 13th planet that blew itself off, causing all of our problems in this solar system in the first place, and whose denizens have now reincarnated here, giving us the hell we're catching. When these strands now, with the new sun energies that were not present before, so you couldn't do it. If you can do, as the brother said, and as inwardly all of you have felt, and I'll read you, I'll give you a reading now, each of you know that this year, and in fact it probably started with some of you 5 years ago, you're supposed to change the way you did things. Some of you have. Some of you have slipped and you've chastised. But you know there's a better way and you should be following it. Some of you have fought like mad to get active in politics and you've tried, but you know no longer is it really valid and there's a better way, and I got to spend some time with that too. Some of you have dropped out of some of your churches, not because you didn't love the choir, not because you didn't love the fine clothes, not because you didn't like the people, but the soul food was missing. It was not cooked right. You know, once you get the good soul food, the old soul food goes away and you start searching for a different cook. Well, we are the cooks. We must prepare our own food. Therefore, nobody can take anything away from thou and thee that present and prepares your own table. No longer will they be able to take away a church or a leader. You will become the church and the leader. You always were, you just didn't know it. Now you must awaken to that concept. And for those of you, be they mother, father, sister, brother, husband, or wife, who cannot take that stand with you, do not denounce them, but do not wait for them. The planet needs you now. Two in the field, one chosen, one called. It's happening. How do you make contact? You want to, with all your heart and all your soul. And then you get the right contact. Other than that, you might get what they call an abduction, like many of the United States government people are abducting people and blaming it on aliens because they do have spacecraft now, and the time for the showdown is at hand. If you do not cloak yourself in truth, if you do not have a core that cannot be shaken under the worst oppression, where fear enters in and causes you to lose your electromagnetic field, you will suffer physical harm. If you can become so resolute and so believed in your Creator, and vibrate and do the things that at least you can do to dial the number for the Creator, you will have confidence that will grow on a minute-to-minute basis until you will feel that you can contact your Creator alone. If this gives you problems, that's okay, but you're not ready. If it doesn't, and you know inwardly that you should be able to do that because inwardly you feel that you do have the potential to be a God, and I did not say a universal prime creator, I said a God, then go for it, because now is the time. Not only is the diet necessary, because the more meat in the diet, the harder it is for you to concentrate on anything that is not physical. And the more energy you will burn up, that you could be developing psychic powers trying to digest food. And plus, you can't pick up the higher frequencies of the callings that are being broadcast to you. That's why the need for the change in diet that most of you feel. Why the need for also giving up the cigarettes and the drinks? Because they also slow you down, and on your tippy toes jumping up and down, the higher forces, the heavenly angels, still have to hold their nose and reach through the mire to reach you. So at least meet them halfway. The thoughts that you hold as you sleep, as you wake, as you traverse and go about your daily occupations, as you do everything, are pretty much constant and reach a certain frequency, because some of you will not slip past a certain thought progression. You only go so low now. And anything that threatens to take you past that, you will reject. That's why you're having to reject some old friends, and you're fortunate if you get one a lifetime, some old philosophies, some old habits, and reaching out and jumping out into space where you're not sure what's there, but you know something is telling you if you're going to do it. Whoop! There it is. The world's governments are shook to their core. They thought they could play gods forever. They thought that they could let the most dynamic placed people ever to be put upon a physical planet in a free will zone. They thought they had them beaten and down, and doggone it, once more, here they come, arising and awakening, shouting, but this time with a chorus that is shaking the very heavens. Because you are beginning to understand who you really are. They say that the Hubble telescope doesn't work. They lie. The Hubble telescope worked too well. It brought back pictures of Cydonia on Mars, and it blew them up so anybody could see. Professor Hoagland addressed the UN at the beginning of last year in January and told them how the world scientific community was up in arms because all of the Viking, NASA's little things that were sent to Mars and flybys, and all of the things that were being spent with your money, your tax dollars that the international bankers milk you from daily, and they know you suffer and they love every minute of it, that they had found something on Mars that should have been shared with the world community, and they didn't want to do it. They found in Cydonia, we'll just call that the place that they chose to call that, a 5-sided pyramid and a sphinx. They found on the moon 3-sided pyramids and a sphinx. They found in the Giza Plateau a 4-sided pyramid, 7 of them, and a sphinx. And they began to try and put their geometric patterns together to see, could there be something about this? Could there be familiarity here? Well, since on a Charlton Heston special recently, they stated that the fact that the Sphinx could have been maybe a carving of a Negroid king. And then they laughed and said, wouldn't that be something? So they said, no, it can't be. So Hoagland and Heston agreed that it probably was just of some kind of a lion god, a lion man. Many people wondered why they bombed Grenada. They wondered why they messed with Panama. And I have tapes and videos, and maybe some of you do. The Panama deception, all a big lie. The Waco lie, all a big lie. They don't do anything but lie. I don't think they know what the truth is. That's why I listen to nothing they say anymore. They're liars. They're fearful liars, and that's the worst kind because that's a coward. In these pictures, even though Professor Hoagland, and I compliment him for having the guts to stand up and say they're wasting the taxpayers' money and are deceptive, his conclusion was that this figure was of a lion man. And he went on to show the double sides together that a computer can give you, the enhancement views, the right side, left side. In Grenada, there was a woman there, somewhat referred to as Markheidi, or Makikuti, something along that line. I may need some help from you on that. That's said to be a ruler or queen there in Grenada, and it was said that she had a celestial origin.